Hi friends, Christine here, and in this video I'm going to show you a method for making a tree bark covered book like this one. And I want to clarify a couple of things because I don't want you to be confused. In the video you'll see two different books being worked on. One looks similar to this and another looks more like this. It's a red Reader's Digest book. And that's because when I was making the video I actually was creating two separate books. So this one is the brown book in the video, and then there's the red one I'm still working on and hope to share with you soon. It was the same technique for a very different result. Anyway, this is a video for making this version, or the beginning of making this version, and I hope that you find it useful. Then the other thing is I apologize that my head winds up in frame several times, or at least a couple of times. It was when I was even less experienced than I am now, which is not very experienced, in making these kinds of videos, and my big head just shows up more often than I'd like. But bear with that and you'll get all the information you need, and at no time do you not see what you need to see, I think. So anyway, thanks for being here and let's go. Today we're going to take these book covers and transform them into something stupendous. Believe me, take my word for it. So as you can see, they're just regular old Reader's Digest that you can find at book sales, flea markets, thrift shops for next to no money. And this one happens to be the Guide to the Birds of Trinidad and Tobago, which sounds spectacular, but I've already gutted the book. And so you can see I've gutted the book. I've removed the whole text block, and I did that simply, for those who've never done it before, by taking a blade and slicing along the end sheets. Now this one I actually left the end sheets in because they were kind of nice, but I can see now that I don't need them for this project. So I'm going to very carefully slice these out as well. And the truth is, it's easiest to do it from this side. So, but you want to be careful to not cut through the spine. So, there we go. Don't even need that. I'm going to trim this back with scissors. I'm going to keep this because it's kind of cool. And it's possible, yeah, I don't even need to take a blade near the spine here, which is even better. But that's how I would have removed the actual text block of pages. It was sliced this way. I'll do a video at some point that shows that more clearly. But now this is kind of messy, so I do want to clean it up. And I don't like putting blades too close to the spine. Too many times I have destroyed them by one little slip and cutting through. So that's good. And here you can see some of the mole, it's still attached. There we go. And I can continue to trim it as close to the spine as possible. You want it kind of tidy. It's going to be covered, so it really doesn't matter too much. But you can see here that it's glued. The end paper was glued to the back of the book and the spine. I'm not going to cut that here. I'm going to leave that so for strength. And if it cuts itself, that's fine, but I'm going to leave it. So I'm going to come in, just trim this down. Here you can see it even a little better at this end. So I'm just going to go in and clip. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to leave this little part because it's attached to this, and what I don't want to have happen is this to rip around the outside of the binding. So that one's done. Maybe I can clean this one up a little bit more. There we go. All right, that's clean enough. And this book came reasonably clean at the start. I could clean that up, but it's not necessary. It's going to be covered, and it's in the well of the spine anyway. So now we have to do a few things to make the book a little bit more organically shaped. And to do that, I'm going to put some protection down on my work mat, and we'll get to it with some very exciting tools like this and this and this. All right, so the first thing I want to do is actually reinforce this spine. And I do this for really any gutted book project I make, whether it be for a box or a journal, just something to give this now weakened spine area a little reinforcement. And I'm going to do it with another cracker box. You're going to know all the crackers I eat, Cheez-Its and Triscuits being among the top two. And I'm just going to put some glue onto the Triscuit side. And we're going to stick that right in place. Normally, on many bindings, I would tuck it under this material here, but on most Reader's Digest books, I find it does not come up. I don't know, whatever they do in their manufacturing method, it doesn't come up. And once again, my bone folder is across the room, so I'm just going to use the back of this palette knife to burnish this down and let it take hold. All right, that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Take glue off the top. Now do this one. And oh my head. Well, I have the biggest head on the planet, I swear. Okay, well, I have this little knife. This might help me. I like putting it in this, inside of this, because it's tidier and keeps it a little more secure. So same thing. I'm going to just put some glue into this section. Oh, this is garlic and onion with poppy seeds, one of my favorites. Okay, close the glue, because we know what'll happen if I don't. And you'll have to excuse my voice. Again, it's really kind of squeaky, chunky today. I think I have some sort of sinus action going on. Okay, so there we have that. Again, I'm just going to burnish it down. Give it a second to dry. And we could even stick a little glue under this area. No, you don't need much. And this area. Well, that was too much, but that's okay because it also won't be seen later. So the truth is, I hung this little ribbon to kind of keep my head from bouncing into the frame, because I do have a big head, and I can't always see whether I am covering the work you want to see happen by leaning forward. That all. Okay, so that's done, and that'll keep that sort of straight as well, which really isn't that important. I like rounded spines, so I might try and round that up later, but for right now, I'm just going to let this dry. I'm going to roll it a little bit, because I will be happy later if this has a little bend to it. Something that makes it a little less straight. Not much, just something there, just a nice little curve, something that's not quite so rigid. All right, so now comes the part of the project where we start to make a mess. And I would normally do this outdoors, but it's like 12 degrees outside. So I'm going to do it indoors and make the mess and freak out the cat by running the drill. But all in all, it should go pretty quickly, and I'll show you how I create this cover to feel a little bit more organically shaped. All right, so let us begin. So I have a drill and a bunch of a saw with a fine blade and a rasp, a rasp and another rasp and another saw and a file. And so my point here is to create an edge to this book that looks as though it's been a little bit beat up. And you've seen me do this before with the hardboard covers that I've made, but now I'm going to do it on this regular book board. So it's going to be a little bit different, and I'm not actually sure how it's going to work, but this is what we want to do. So you can see I'm really digging in to this area and making it wavy almost, but not completely wavy, just in spots. And again, don't worry about the inside cover. We're going to rasp that off too. There we go. You can see how it's making a little dent here, a little dent there. We definitely want to take down the corners, because after you see what we're going to do with this, square corners would not be likely. So that's good on that side. And it's an interesting difference doing this on the book board versus the hardboard that I usually use to make covers like this. But this book board is yielding to my wishes, more or less. Try this other one too, on this corner. Oh, that's good, we like that. Okay. So anything that sort of makes the cover just not square, because for what we're going for, square would probably not happen. I'll take a little bit of that off later. I'm going to just cut it off. So we're going to be building onto these book boards, so the fact that we're loose, or that we're weakening it a little bit in spots, really doesn't make a difference. So now I'm going to try to drill a little hole right through here. Oops. Always start up and then come down. Okay, remember, if you're going to drill indoors, to drill into something. And let me see if I can figure out why my cat is deciding to harass us. She seems to be pretty persistent with it today. So let's see, now I'm going to go in that spot. And I really do want to kind of keep that out. Okay, I could just leave that hole like that. I think I will for now. And that, and just do the whole rest of the book. So this saw is an X-Acto saw. I really love it. It's useful for a lot of things. So my goal is here, I want to cut that. So I'm going to do that with this saw. And so there's a hole. And you're kind of learning with me here on this, because the material is so completely different than hardboard. It does yield a little more easily, which is nice, but it's also a whole different approach. You need to take a little bit of different approach. There we go. I feel like I want something here a little bit more rounded, where the book may have been opened and closed in this area. You know, that's where a thumb would be. So let's try and make it look like where a thumb would be. Oh, that's good. Okay. So you get the idea that this is what we're doing, and we're going to do it all the way around both sides, the front and back of the book, and really get it pretty tattered. So I'm going to go off camera now, just because it'll go quicker, and I'll be back. And if I come up with any unique approaches, I will turn the camera back on in terms of, oh, you know, this effect is met by this tool. Otherwise, I'm just going to finish this up. I'm going to do both, and I'll be back. I'm turning this back on for a second because I want to illustrate here that the goal is to get this edge of the book to feel like it's been worn away. So what I've done here is I've drilled a hole because I want to get a deeper hole that I thought would be more easily done by starting with a drilled hole. But now I'm taking a blade, and I happen to be using this one, and on an angle, if I put it down, on an angle I am taking away some of the book board. And by doing that, it gives a more organic feel to this edge. Like this will get cleaned up. But you can see here it's narrow in spots and thicker in spots, and that's what we want. The idea that it has sort of been worn, or it just grew more organically than, say, a straight edge. So just showing that we're going to go from a angle, not a really deep angle, just enough. Pull that back. There we go. And I want to take a little bit more off there, try a little bit deeper of a cut there. You know, it's interesting because the hardboard that I normally use is it's harder to cut, but it's easier to shape than the cardboard is. But all the same, this is going to work great. There we go. So you can see that's what we're looking for. Thick and thin areas where it comes to almost nothing. So continuing on, I'll be back. All right, so it's on to the next book cover. And forgive me for being a little inarticulate as I'm working on these today. I don't usually speak while I work, and since I'm just figuring this out as I go, I'm doing a lot of talking in my head, and it never quite makes it out my mouth. So I'll try to be better at describing what I'm doing. So the first thing I'm going to do again is check this for areas of the cover that maybe aren't as glued down. That's okay, that's the inside. As we want, and this is all pretty good. I mean, I could pick off these little pieces, but that will be fine. So now it's time to do the second, and we're going to do the same thing. Give it a good wrinkle to start with. And try to not get it in the glue. And we'll just start with this. So, same idea, I'm going to start with the spine first. And this is on a different kind of book cloth that I'm hoping will prove as loving to the tissue paper as the Reader's Digest book did. Doesn't matter. Let's put this down, kind of center it somewhere, start pressing. Now we want those wrinkles, largely vertical in this case, to happen and give it some texture. Oh, that looks great. Okay, so I'm going to leave that. I'm running my finger through the spine area, little indentations, and just making sure that the book can close. And it can. So I'm going to continue. Start with the cover since there's already some glue on it. And I'm going to need more glue. Let me get that now. Okay. very important to do the edges and make sure there's enough glue. This is actually soaking in a lot to both the fabric and the cardboard, so I'm going to be very generous with it. And same thing, bring it back over and make my little archy looking wrinkles. Oh, that looks good. Okay, and the back cover we do the same. And maybe I could do it without getting my head in the picture. So, lots and lots of glue. The sponge really soaks it up. I don't always use this kind of brush for this job because of that, but that's what I'm using today. So, getting a good connection here. See, here's a piece I should have probably pulled off, but that's okay. Okay. So now the same thing. Make the wrinkles, and I'm doing it just really by just kind of pushing it around and pulling on it vertically to get the kind of wrinkles I'm hoping for. Which here, you see it's already stuck, so I'm not going to try and coerce that to be something else. I've already stuck it down. It seems happy there. Now I'm going to come in, and I think first I will trim the top and bottom. I don't need that much paper, and it's kind of in the way. All right, so now I can pick it up a little easier and start encouraging it to go in the spots I want while we get ready to do the other side. Still want to make sure that it can close and open and there's not too much gunking up that gully. I think that'll be fine. That's nice. I think we're good. All right, so now I do want to go ahead and do the inside so that we can start working on some of the sculpting that we did of the cover, and that's more easily done once it's been glued down. Sorry, I hear me in my head. Okay, so remember to be generous on those edges. And then all the way around. And here too, we don't have to go through the middle. We can, I did not miter. Oh, and I didn't cut off all the excess either. We do that because it's really not necessary to have that much tissue in that area. And this also is not necessary. So let's take this off. Miter this corner, and then bring the rest in. And cut this off. The pattern, the texture we get on these edges is not as important, say, as it is on the cover. So if you want to squish them up, do it, and get some ridges in it, definitely. But it's not as important. It's going to be covered. Okay, so that being that, I'm going to come in and start molding to the divots, but we'll come back and do that in full after let's continue gluing the back. All right, so now, okay, get them up here. And the edges. And spread it out a little. Making sure we get down into the crevices on each side of the spine. Miter those, whoop, it just ripped at the corner, so that's fine. Miter those corners. And bring in that paper. All right, so even with mitered corners, we're going to wind up with a glob of paper in the corners, and that's really completely fine. In fact, it's kind of nice. So, same thing, try to not let them stick together, and just go through and contour the tissue paper to match that beautiful organic edge that we've created, that you've created. All right, that's a little gloppy. Here's the same thing, you can see it just takes a little pushing and then it will dry like that. So going all around and pinching to follow the thick and thin variation in width that you created, if you did. And for this project, it's highly recommended. So now here, it's ripped a little bit in the corner and the cardboard, which is very frayed, has popped through, which is actually kind of nice. So I'm good with that. That's a very happy accident. And then same thing, just going around and making sure that all of the tissue is stuck to the cover. Okay, that's a little tear, that's fine, that will not matter. That is one big glob of glue. So that's going to take some time to dry. But that's what we're going to let happen next, is that this gets put down and we're going to give it time to dry and then come over and do a second coat on the outside of the tissue paper to really seal it and cement its future. So that's it for now. I'm going to go do a little workout maybe, and I'll come back and hopefully it'll be dry and I'll be able to finish this up today. So this way, I can move this further. Don't need that. And same thing. Again, I'm not sure what's happening with this and whether I'll need to address it when it's actually time to go. Interestingly, I mean, there was paper on the inside of the book cloth here, so I don't know why it lifted up. I've never had that happen. You know, I've used this same method of attaching a piece of reinforcement cardboard to a spine for like every book I make like this, and that's never happened. So it could be just something in the materials of this book. Not that side, this side. So here we go. Give it a good protective coat on the spine itself, trying to avoid too much getting into the gutter or the hinge, just to avoid future opening and closing issues. So if there's a tear in that area, you do want to seal it, but you don't want to add too much to that space. Doing this to get it into some of these wrinkles to make sure they're not going to pop up, and into the edge. Oh look, there's my big head again. Sorry about that, guys. This is not my jam to video stuff. I'm good with live instruction. Like I could teach you how to do a lot of things clearly, but on video, when I'm really just working with myself, it's a whole different concept and one that I'm not really good at. But I'll get better, and that's the whole thing. You know, I'm spending more and more time lately doing things that would have once scared me, and not a lot does scare me, but the whole video thing. But if I didn't do it, I wouldn't be able to share these things with you. Sometimes you just gotta get on the plane. Oh, well, I say that because I used to be, I had developed a fear of flying. I wasn't always afraid to fly, but I had developed a fear of flight. Actually, no, fear of crashing. Flight was fine. And then after a traumatic family event, I realized that life was really short, and if I wanted to see every continent on the earth, I was going to have to get on the plane. And convincing myself of that, I was able to fly to a lot more places, understanding that if there are things you want to do, no matter how afraid you might be, you have to just set yourself up for success, and that was one of them. And that's how I feel about this video stuff. I feel like I can get it, I'll get better, and it won't terrify me forever. So if you'll just hang out with me until then, I don't guarantee a big payoff, but I think certainly a satisfying one, and one that is equal to the amount that you put into your projects. So there you go, more drying time. So this one is pretty dry, and I'm not going to paint it. I don't think I need to. If any of this were to show through, I don't think it would matter at all. So the texture paste I normally use is just the texture paste opaque crackle that I normally use for this. But today, because I'm getting low on this, I'm also going to use the distressed grit paste. And this comes in two flavors, opaque and translucent. I've never used a translucent, although I have it. I have used this for a couple small applications. So I'm going to use this. I think it could go far in furthering. Essentially, this book I want to feel like tree bark when I'm done. So I feel like that gritty sort of texture could work for this, as much as the cracking texture, the feeling of the tree expanding year after year and basically cracking its own skin is how I've done it before. Let me grab here. Here's one where you can see it's shinier than I'd like it, but you can see that it looks a lot like tree bark on both sides. And so this is what I'm going for, but in this application, because I'm a little low on the opaque crackle paste, I'm going to try the grit paste too. So let's see how this goes. I'm going to start with my first love, which is the crackle. And what I'll be doing is putting crackle paste in areas on this cover. I mean, certainly to cover this up, and down the spine as well. I will try to avoid the hinge area and the gutter here, because I think I will not be helped by globbing it up in there. So that is the plan. And like I said, this is a whole new technique for me. It's not how I normally do it. So you're learning with me, or I'm learning with you. How's that? So I'm going to begin by getting some crackle paste on the back of this palette knife, and quite daringly, I'm going to just smear it down. And you load it up and smear it down. So since I'm going for a tree bark texture, I want to stay a little bit vertical on it, because that's how tree bark tends to go. But again, I mean, we can mimic nature without duplicating it, and it just really needs to feel like it could be how it is. So I'm going to put a smear of it down the spine, like I said, without getting it into the gutter. I know, it's called a hinge. I keep calling it the gutter. So I'm going to come back here. I'm actually going to just do this with my finger and turn it around. That's a little gobby. The thinner you apply this paste, I have found, the more quickly it crackles. And kind of the more, oops, that's no good. Let's take that right out of there. Let's use the finger. What was I saying? The quicker it crackles, the thinner the layer. And also I find that the thinner the layer, the finer the crackle. And I don't necessarily want a super fine crackle at this point. But we're going to just let this go. I might have enough to do both books without using the grit paste, but I feel like I kind of want to try it. So you just have to come along with me. And I'm not doing anything on the underside. The underside where the end papers will reach almost to the edge is going to be, it'll get its texture from just the tissue paper that's been Mod Podged onto it. Okay, so here's the bulk of, yep, I just got a thumbprint in there. We've got plenty of texture paste, and I have also on other projects of this type done it in a couple of layers. So if I don't love what I get from this, I can come back. Now here too, I'm going to come back up this way and get it out of the hinge. Here too, the fact that I'm not hitting it everywhere is fine. There's a lot to be said for the mismatched surfaces, that it's not fully covered. Let me just wipe this off for a second. And I'm looking at this, I'm thinking maybe I don't even need the grit paste, but you know, I'm feeling a little adventurous. So let me just cover this so that it doesn't get too much air. And I don't want to mix these two because I like the crackle paste on its own. So I'm going to use a different knife here. I'm just going to stick it in a few spots. We'll see what happens. Hopefully we'll like it. It's a little bit different. It has a little bit different texture. It has a little bit different opacity, or not, yeah, opacity and finish. Like the grit paste looks like it's a little bit more chalky than the crackle paste. So let me see, I'm going to put some here. We're just going to let it all dry together. And again, I don't want to mix the two, so I'm going to keep cleaning my palette knife. And I don't know where to put it. Let's try some here. Again, I'm trying to mimic the feel of bark, tree bark. It doesn't have to mimic the actual tree bark. Just the feel. Oh, there's a lot of glops on there. I'm not sure glop is a word, but you know what I mean. I really like this here, so I'm not sure I want to muck with that. So let me put some on the spine. Again, this is my experiment. So how it ultimately comes out, I'm not going to know until it's dried. I mean, I probably won't know until it's done. But there you go. I think that looks pretty good. Again, I like this area. I like these areas that are negative spaces. Almost feels like it's that layer below. And since I may or may not add another layer of this, I'm going to leave it for now because less can often be more. And I find that I usually go past the less point pretty quickly. So I'm going to close this up and just wait and see what I think. Again, I can always add more of the grit paste or the crackle paste, but I'll pop back in as it begins to dry and show you some of the results. And here you can see I think you can see on both of these sides the area where because the way the palette knife skims this surface, you do get the feeling of some rings, which I know it does not show on the bark of a tree, but you get that feeling. And again, we're just trying to evoke the feeling of a tree. I don't want to recreate tree bark. I want it to feel as close as possible in your heart, not so much in your hands, if that makes any sense. So we need to let this dry for a while, and then we'll go on to painting in the next video.